Right, okay, let's just remind you that there's one bar camp going on at the moment. Come and play, my friends, how mobile livens up the point of sales. That's the bar camp. You can go to that. Or you can take part in the perhaps the most crucial debate of the day, because we're now down to the nuts and the bolts of what we're talking about all day. How can data collected through social media and mobile be used to create value? And in order to give us their experience, as people from other companies have been doing throughout the day, this is about companies sharing with companies. Let's welcome onto stage from Barclaycard, Becky Moffat, who's head of digital engagement. Becky, on the stage. Let's have them one by one, as it's the last day. Becky, up you come. Big round of applause for Becky. We have the cross-channel director from Camailleux, Michel Koch. Here comes Michel. And last but by no means least, from Unilever, we have the Global Digital General Counsel, Jamie Barnard. So let's have Jamie on the stage as well. Let me move around so I can see you a bit. There we are. Right, this is the last debate of the day. As you probably know, the Wi-Fi is actually working, so we can now put into play the system for all the day. If you wish to ask any questions, there's an app on your iPad, and you can put in the question. The question will then come back to us here, and all of a sudden, apparently, these questions will appear on the screen, and I will challenge you with the most relevant and most popular questions. Right, well, let's, I think, start with probably with Jamie. You've been a marketing lawyer for over a decade now, that you've been working with brands to make sure that they deliver their creative brilliance without too much compromise, and also, of course, without creating legal risk. Last year, you created a new role within Unilever, providing legal support to the global media innovation team, focusing entirely on digital and social media. Let's have a bit of an introduction from you, first of all, to talk us into the subject. I think it's going to work soon. Donc le micro va sans doute marcher bientôt. No, could we perhaps take that one? I think that's probably a question. No, neither. Let's try this one. Let's see if one of these microphones... Yes, we have one. Jamie, can you just show the people? I think these are so beautiful. I've never seen notes. Jamie doesn't make notes. Look, that's his notes. That's, I don't know if you can see that. It's, that's his, he sits in the office and he does these preparation drawings. I think it's beautiful. Can you explain what all this means?
That's just how my mind works. I work better with pictures than with words, which is perhaps ironic for a lawyer. So I joined Unilever 7 years ago. Last year I took a job purely around digital and social. And within 3 months I took over all the privacy, because it was pretty obvious you can't do digital unless you really get a good grip on privacy. I support the media team with all of their media spend globally to make sure that the money that they invest is well spent, that we don't get into difficulties with the regulators, but more importantly, that we are competitive. You know, we're obviously striving to be the best digital marketing company in the world, and to do that, you've got to have a pretty good grip on the law. So,
well, what are the problems involved with Unilever and the law specifically? Well,
I mean, obviously in the social space, I think now we have some 30 million consumer records, and that number's growing, probably 10 million a year, and escalating. And as we'll talk about today, it's very easy to get a lot of data, but having the data is nothing if you can't use it. So my job really is to make sure that we can really squeeze the value out of that data without compromising the trust consumers have in us to look after that data properly.
Okay, well, let's go into that a bit more later on. Becky Moffat, you're head of the digital engagement at Barclaycard. If you talk about data, obviously in terms of Barclaycard, in terms of financial sectors, there's an awful lot of data, and there's an awful lot of sensitive data to have to deal with. So I'm sure there's legal issues, there's privacy issues, all kinds of things. What's your engagement? This is your title. It's an interesting title, Head of Digital Engagement. What's your engagement with the social media generally?
So with Barclaycard, we have a very interesting position because we actually have a duty of care in financial services to have the right data about customers and be very, very clear in terms of how we identify who customers are and then how we share information with them. So the overlay that we get with social media is a great opportunity for us, but also a cause for some challenge around, are we absolutely certain that this is a person who they're saying they are, and does it match back to the data records that we hold? In terms of Barclaycard and digital engagement, what we're finding is that financial services fundamentally isn't a particularly engaging subject for most people. People don't necessarily get very excited about going out with a credit card. They get excited about what they buy with it. So what my team work on is how do we actually create experiences for customers around their card that enable them to understand more about what the card does, how they can manage their money better, and how they can sort of share experiences. So in that sense, the social media and the data that we can leverage through social media tells us more about what our customers are doing and enables us to have a more coherent and engaging conversation with them.
What kind of experiences are you trying to encourage debates about? Because you basically take your credit card out, and as you say, it's the sexy part is what you buy with it, not the actual buying of something.
So Barclaycard is very much positioned as a payments brand rather than a financial services brand. We are very much trying to be the turn-to payment mechanism, and we have some very, very significant competitors in that, in the likes of PayPal and new entrants. In terms of what we're trying to do around engaging experiences is how do we actually play around the whole of the sort of the buying cycle that customers experience, and how can we help customers to not only make the right payment choice, but actually make the right purchasing choice, so therefore inform them around whether it's the right washing machine for them, whether it be getting great deals on tickets for events that we sponsor, and so on. So it's really around broadening the role that Barclaycard plays in customers' day-to-day lives.
So that's working in collaboration with other customers.
Absolutely.
Is that proving difficult though, because that's about sharing data between customers?
It is challenging at a one-to-one level. At an aggregate level, what we're finding is that we can paint effectively pen portraits of customers, particularly around how people spend money and people like me. So there is a great deal of interest around financial services, around do I look normal? Is my behaviour normal? Do people like me save, spend, do in the right way? And what would other people like me recommend? So at an aggregate level, we're able to actually take a lot of the information that we get on spend behaviour in particular, and then play that back in terms of this is what spend profiling looks like. So that's the way that we can use data to help customers understand more what they might want to do.
Right, and Michel Koch, I'm glad you're here. You were on a train about a quarter of an hour ago, which you've just arrived, thanks to one of these taxi motor things. You're cross-channel director at Cameo, and even though you're not currently specifically working on this particular subject at Cameo, the reason we asked you was because you've had previous experience at Quelle and Conrad, where you set up customer reviews, a bizarre voice. Bizarre, but not bizarre voice, bizarre voice. Could you tell us something a little bit more about that? Because you were very much involved in using social media in those companies.
Well, I guess user-generated content is really key to the conversation that you want to build with them. Your customers are willing to give a word about your brand, about your products, and it's just about having that content as much as possible on the websites. It's a fact that it helps convince other customers to buy the products, but it's also a fact that it tends to generate more loyalty. it tends to generate less returns. It has lots of benefits provided you have an offer that's fit for the...
Why does it generate more loyalty?
You tend to get a fan base out of that conversation that you built with the customers. So I guess you also identified your ambassadors through customer reviews. And as a loyalty program per se, you can also get other people to join. It's very viral if you use it properly, because people will tend to have their friends know that they published a review on a product or they like this product. It's in the same way they do with Facebook. So I guess it's really it's not just a trend. I mean, it's a must now on all e-commerce websites. And I guess we haven't seen the beginning of using those reviews in retail. But I strongly believe that for retailers like us, I mean, it's not just about having that on the internet. It's also spreading the word in the shops. And sooner or later, and I think there are some experiments in that respect, you can see product reviews in the stores that are published online, or people who are doing reviews in store. And then it's instantly visible on screens in the stores. And
Can I say something about this issue of customer reviews? Because I'm a journalist, I'm not in your world, I'm a journalist, and I have very clear experience of this. Last year, for example, I'll give you an example out of my life, I hosted the morning show on France's classical music station, France Musique, between 7 and 9 for a year. The listening figures of France Musique had been going down like that, and I actually managed to put them up a little bit because they invested in a campaign and all the rest of it, and so forth. But the emails I got when I was on France Musique, I got up at 4 o'clock every morning, and I would arrive in the office. There would be a cascade of insults. People, I couldn't imagine some of the things people said to me. I would read this at 4 o'clock in the morning. It was actually a little bit depressing. One woman would write in every day and make a list of all the things that I'd got wrong the day before. Monsieur, je ne décolère pas de votre nomination, and all the rest of it, and so forth. What I'm saying is that if I'd have listened to those reviews and the emails I got at 4 o'clock in the morning, those are the people who bothered to write. I don't think not many of the people who actually listened, who hadn't listened before, who obviously were listening, because the viewing figures went up a little bit, the listenership, but it wasn't representative at all. The people who were motivated to write me those emails were all the people who disliked what I did. So if I'd have listened to that, not known that the listeners' things were going up, I would have left after the first 2 months. It was a totally disrepresentative, a discouraging experience.
Of course, but you are not a product, I hope.
I was for France Musique.
And people are reviewing very differently online with product e-commerce websites. The average mark that they give is...
Are you sure, though? Because it's the online thing.
No,
online, when you're sitting behind your computer...
It's only statistics. The average mark they give out of 5 is 4.2 or 4.6. People like the products, they say it. If they don't like them, for whatever reason, which is not related to the product, then it's not published. I mean, you have a moderation tool with this. And if it's a question of, I don't like the color, then it's not relevant for other people. What's relevant if the product has a defect, if the product is oversized, or, I mean, you know, other than that, I mean, reviews are not published. And to be honest, it's good to have bad reviews too, because then it makes your website even more credible. And if you have bad reviews...
How do you control that, though? How do you censor what you put on and what you don't?
I mean, with the solutions that is used, I mean, to name one is Bazaar Voice. They have a team of people who process each review, and whenever it's not product related, then it goes to another service. It goes to your customer service. It goes to your product service. It's very well done in the sense that it's going to be only things that are relevant for other customers that are going to be published, whether they are good or bad.
Becky?
I think it's very interesting around how you marry up the customer feedback, voice of customer, and then also running a commercial operation. So prior to my time at Barclaycard, I worked for a local media company in the UK, and one of the websites that we ran was the largest local community website in the UK, which was a community website for one of the new cities in the UK. And part of that site was a restaurant guide. And to say that it was the most challenging part of the job would be an absolute understatement, because we did get genuine reviews of restaurants, and people really valued those genuine reviews of restaurants, but the negative reviews were invariably, we policed it, we monitored it, but there was always an element of if a review wasn't good, the restaurateur would ring in and say, I'm pulling my advertising. So trying to actually manage that sort of open dialogue with customers with a commercial business model is very challenging, because you are always going to get the pull between honesty, money, and then somebody trying to sabotage another person's business potentially. So it's a really interesting dynamic in terms of how you actually manage that.
Jamie?
Yeah, I just want to build with that. I think most people in the room here will realize that if you want to play in the social space, you've got to take the rough with the smooth. Reviews are, I mean, you can't exaggerate how important they are to businesses. They can be very damaging. I'll give you a great example that's going around virally at the moment with a product called Veet, which is a hair removal cream. And they've just launched a hair removal cream for men.
It's fantastic. I've used it. It actually gets your hair off the shoulders. I can give it a plug. I bought it 2 weeks ago because I get hair on my shoulders. I took it. It's wonderful.
Well, you might be embarrassed to confessing that when
when
you hear the story I'm about to tell you, where a chap actually put it on his genitals. And he wrote a review on Amazon, which is one of the funniest reviews you'll ever read, and I highly urge you just to try and find it. Let's just say he was in immense pain, and he wrote, I don't know, 4 paragraphs about his experience with Veet. Now, it may have put some people off.
Idiot. Why would anybody put Veet on that part of the...
I don't know. I think it was a birthday present for his wife. But the pain he experienced will put some people off. But equally, the viral nature of his complaint is creating enormous publicity for that product. So...
Now, tell us a little bit more about the legal constraints. That's one of the questions we wanted to answer. What is the legal context for using data? Because it's becoming more and more complicated. You yourself seem to me, I have the feeling you're quite an unconventional legal person. Are you part of the new kind of generation of legal person? If so, what is the new legal take on the way we use data, like Becky's data, which is very delicate, sensitive data, sometimes about people's finances? What are the social media changing about legal constraints?
I mean, I think in legal nowadays, you have to take a completely different view. I mean, if you look at the internet, it's all about content sharing, so your approach to intellectual property has to be much more flexible. In the context of data, though, it's really important now, and the technology enables us to go out there and get enormous amounts of data. I mean, the profiling that can be done using technology like Radian 6 or whatever, where you can, and Facebook, let's be honest, if I asked them to give me all the data they have about me and you studied that, I think it would tell you pretty much everything you needed to know, and a lot more. But that data is of no value if you can't use it. And we're in Europe, and we have the strictest data protection regulations anywhere in the world. So being in possession of massive amounts of enormously valuable data, you have to understand what rights you've got to use it, and what parameters you can use it in. So,
could you give us a few examples of what of the differences between European and perhaps American standards of data use? Are there things you can do in Europe? You say we have the strictest standards. What can't you do in Europe that you can do elsewhere? And is it good or what?
Well, broadly speaking, we have regulation in Europe, and they don't have regulation in the US. So they can get away with an awful lot more, and companies like Facebook struggled in the beginning because they came as an American company into Europe and then suddenly realized that they couldn't use data in ways that they thought. So in Europe, there are principles that have to be applied that limit the amount of data you can collect, how long you can store it, how you can use it, and most importantly, how you can transfer that data into other countries. So you can't just send your consumer database to India to be processed, for example. You need to put in agreements and so forth just to make it sure, because other countries don't have the same level of protection that we have in Europe. So you may have heard of Safe Harbor in the US, which is their way of convincing Europe that if they're Safe Harbor registered, that they will protect the data to the same or substantially the same standard as we would expect in Europe.
We have all these guarantees on the web. I mean, I pay for lots of things on the web, Becky, but I always had, this is a secure site and so forth. And to be perfectly honest, I've seen it so often now, I just fill it in and I think, well, what does that mean? It's like, can I really trust that? Because anybody can say this is a secure site and put a kind of like stamp on it. How do I, as a customer, somebody outside the business, I don't know if you were here a few minutes ago, but I said I've just been victim of a PayPal. I mean, I really could have lost 1,400 euros if I hadn't have noticed it. And it took me a month to get the money back, and I didn't do anything. So now I'm a little bit more wary about paying for anything with my credit card. All this stuff is getting a bit more difficult, especially in your sector.
It's very interesting with PayPal, because when we do consumer research, it actually, the facts around security in PayPal are not as strong as the sense of security around PayPal that customers have. And as banks, that's quite worrying for us, in that a new entrant in the marketplace is perceived as more secure than a bank and more safe than a bank, when in fact that's not necessarily the case.
If there's anything from PayPal, I must just say, because I've just given them a piece of bad publicity, I must just say I was very impressed by the way that they dealt with it. I rang them up and I talked to somebody and she seemed really concerned and the whole thing was dealt with. They even sent me a mail afterwards and saying, is your problem yet solved? It took a little time, but I was very impressed by the way that there was somebody there on the phone. It wasn't just a kind of thing I had to fill in. I talked to somebody and she seemed very competent and it was cleared up. I'd just like to say that.
Very glad to hear it.
I'm sorry, I was just going to say, all of this does come down to trust and transparency, and it's so important when you are collecting data and using data from people, that they, especially in this day and age where you can get such intimate data from people, and they are, broadly speaking, on the one hand, quite nervous about sharing the data, but on the other hand, they're really willing to share that data in a trade-off for good content and so forth. And the message as a lawyer that I would give is to really make sure that your consumers understand what you want to collect and why. You know, how are you going to use it? And I think that the really successful companies are the ones, you know, like Google, who have been able now, having had a massive smashing in the press, they articulate how they use your data so clearly that actually if you want to find it out, you can. Whereas a lot of other companies are really struggling to even understand how they're going to use data themselves. And they collect it 1 minute to do one job, and then the next minute they say, well, can we use that data now to go and do something else? And actually in Europe you can't. It's not that straightforward. So work out what you want to do with the data and then make sure you've got the permission and keep a record of that, because only then can you really use it to the fullest extent.
And just to build on that, I think it's one of the things that we're finding in conversation with customers is the element of trust and transparency around why do you want to use data and how can that data help you give them a better service is vitally important. So for us, one of the biggest black boxes is for customers is how do you credit score me? Because all I get is that the computer says no. So for us, that's a really big black box element, and that erodes trust. It makes people think, what is it that you know about me? What information do you have about me? But the conversations we have been having with customers is, if we are very transparent around, if you can tell us around a change in circumstances, if you can tell us around a temporary issue that you may have, then actually we can help you. And we can actually help you manage through that, as opposed to the silences where we will probably do something that isn't necessarily helpful to the customer. So what we're seeing is this real value exchange around, if we can be transparent with customers about why the information is helpful and how we will use it, customers are actually very, very happy to share that level of information and give us interest.
It's the same thing that as I do a lot of things for the SNCF here in France, and it's the whole thing about how much information you give when there's a problem on a train, and it's the eternal debate. Michel.
But one of the issues, and that's for Jamie, at some point you know what you want to do with data, but the next day you want to do something new. And then your point about knowing beforehand what you're going to do with the data, it's a constant evolution, and as far as we're concerned, marketers, they always want to do something new and something more clever with the data. So how do you deal with that? If you have to ask permission each time you do a new use of the data, then you're in trouble, aren't you?
Well, you are, but this is what separates brilliant companies from companies who are trying to catch up, and I'm not disrespecting Cameo, I don't know much about the company. I think the secret is twofold. First of all, when you capture the data, go in broad, be transparent, so that really, I could say to one customer, are you happy for me using your data for marketing purposes? Now, obviously, that's quite broad. I could use it for any brand, Ben & Jerry's, Dove, whatever it might be. But if I go in and say, can I use your data to send you a communication about the next Christmas campaign for Dove? And they say yes. Well, once that campaign's over, I don't have permission to do anything else. So you have to kind of think laterally and broadly, and then set up frameworks so that it's easier to get that consent. And consent doesn't always have to be as specific as you might think. Sometimes it can be quite broad.
Perhaps a word on third-party collection of and usage of data and behavioural information. How far down the road are we with that? How much is my bank information being used without me really knowing?
It isn't. Certainly in banking, we are very restricted in terms of how we can use third-party data. Barclaycard's in quite an interesting position, being both a card issuer and a merchant acquirer. So we see two sides of the equation. So the challenge for us and the opportunity for us is actually within the organisation itself and the construct of Barclaycard as a company. We have a very rounded view of what's happening. And our challenge is actually how do you build two siloed entities and create one single view of your customers, and then leverage that, because that's very powerful, and that's a very big opportunity that to date we haven't leveraged, and it's a lot of work that we're doing at the moment. But in terms of us sharing that detailed data on individuals, we are very, very restricted around how we can do that.
I've noticed, actually, I'm British, I live in France. There's a big difference. I'm a customer, I can talk about it because it's not your thing, with HSBC in France and in the UK. The security level in the UK is much, much higher. In order to access the information about my accounts, I have to go these incredible complicated things about, I even had to fill in a question once about my favourite insect, which I was asked to me afterwards. Then you get these security devices sent through the post. On my HSBC thing in France, all I have to do is put in one code, it's been the same code, etc. So I love my HSBCs, and I really dislike the UK one. And yet, when I'm victim of fraud, I'm the first person to complain. So you have to deal with difficult customers like me, I guess, who are never happy. Basically, we can't be bothered with the security, but we're very unhappy when it doesn't work.
And what I would say is we're all talking here about personal data, and historically it was always the porn industry that led the way in innovation in digital, and now banking is leading the way in some respects, insofar as they're very good at hashing information, decrypting information. So when you put your password into your online banking, when that's sent to the bank, it's sent as an encrypted code. So anyone intercepting it would mean nothing. And when it arrives at the bank, they've already encrypted the password too, so they just match the two together. They're matching gibberish in a sense. So there's no transfer of your password. Now, if you look at something that Facebook are doing now called custom audiences, it's a great example of how companies can manipulate data without actually using personal data at all. So they'll take a consumer list, say 100,000 consumers for the Knorr brand. They give us the technology where we could effectively encrypt all those email addresses. We can give the encrypted email addresses to Facebook. They cannot unencrypt those. They don't know what it is. It's all complete gobbledygook. I don't know what that is in French. But they then match that to the same hash data at their end, which is also, they couldn't work out what it is, but they can match the two. So they can then tell us, well, based on that code, and the fact that we also have that code, I can tell you that that person is on Facebook. So you end up with a list, a smaller list, of your consumers who are Facebook consumers. Nobody has used data to do that. Facebook don't know what data you've sent them. It's very clever, and actually it sounds risky, but I've really looked into it, and it's not. But the advantage then, and this is where data becomes so valuable, is the targeting. Because I can now target on Facebook an ad to those people who I know are not only in our Knorr database and have given us permission to contact them, but I can do it to a 25-year-old man who likes shopping in Carrefour, who goes skateboarding at the weekends and has an overweight wife. You know, I mean, it really is down to that level of detail.
Is there not a phenomenon of people actually kind of like reacting against this? I opened a Gmail account a year ago, and I thought it was fantastic. Everything's totally free. You don't have to pay for it, and so forth. And then I started to notice all the adverts that came after about 3 months of nothing happening. And then all of a sudden there would be an advert which I'd say, oh, yes, I am actually, you know, interested in that, and so forth. And then I started to figure out that they were reading my emails. They must have been obviously processing the data within my emails to realize that I wanted to buy a couch and so forth. And I suddenly started thinking, well, you know, isn't that a danger that there's going to be a bit of rejection against it?
People are getting quite nervous about this, and particularly with online behavioural advertising, where they can track your behaviour across multiple websites. The truth is actually they're not tracking too much in the way of your personal information. They're just tracking what your preferences are and profiling you. There's a great example that came out of the US a couple of years ago where the superstore Target, they ran ad campaigns and sent coupons to people. Now, one guy, a dad in Minnesota, barged into the store and had a real go at the store manager. He was like, why are you sending my daughter coupons for baby care and nappies? She's still in high school. Are you trying to encourage her to get pregnant? The store manager was a bit taken aback and apologized. And then 2 days later, the store manager phoned the guy back again to apologize. So just being a good customer manager, I guess. At which point the dad said to the store manager, look, it's me, I owe you an apology. It turns out things have been going on in my house that I didn't know about. She's due in August. And what had happened is Target had spent time with a PhD student creating algorithms that could work out the shopping behavior of females, and they could calculate to within a 90% accuracy which ones are in their second trimester of pregnancy. So as soon as they knew that, they then started sending them coupons for relevant baby stuff. Now that starts to freak people out, and then they start to pull back. But Target didn't stop there. Rather than cancel the campaign, they just started throwing in random stuff, like lawnmowers. So people would think it was more random, but they would still be getting coupons for the baby stuff. So
I think it rather freaked Michelle out from the reaction you were having when you heard that story.
Well, I guess at this point, when it's so precise and that you can really anticipate people's behavior, then yeah, you may have some bad reactions. But I guess the global target of having data and using data for retailers and for merchants is more about creating value to the relationship, adding value to the relationship, the global relationship. On the one hand, the customer will get targeted offers that really match their needs. On the other hand, we will make more precise offers, use less marketing budgets for in vain to target, you know, massively. And then also you see an impact on how you define your offer. At Camailleux, we have had a loyalty program for 1 year. It's been growing very rapidly, and now we're only starting, but it's only 1 year old, starting to use it to provide better products on a daily basis to each of our target groups. And that's also adding value both to the company and the customers. So at some point, yes, I mean, the deal with the customer is let me add value to our relationship.
Okay, well, where do you see this going in the future? We talked a little bit about the reserves and the legal problems and so forth. Where is this going to be in 5, 10 years' time? Is this going to be completely take over the kind of advertising we're used to in the world today? Is everything going to be targeted? Is this the way that value is going to be added using these data? Where are we going?
I think, I mean, as far as Camailleux is concerned, we're going cross-channel, and that's also my point here today, is to say it's not only about looking at the data that you have online, on mobile, on whatever digital device that you can have. It's also about knowing more about what is the general behavior and how can you maintain this relationship when you have stores and people come in and out, what's going on before, what's going on after. And that's where there's still things to be done. I'm not saying we're going to have cameras in the stores to film people or trackers or things, but I mean, at some point, yes, you want to have a permanent conversation, and that goes on the social networks, that goes on in the stores. It's about making the link between what global information you have with data that you get from the customers, and also what happens in a real life relationship with the vendors.
It's a little bit like Becky's problem with her credit cards, of making them kind of like sexy. It's making the process of using that information acceptable and sexy in some way. Is that true? Becky, where do you think things are going?
I definitely think that there is a very rapid move towards much more sort of perceived one-to-one marketing. I think certainly that one-to-one marketing isn't necessarily as one-to-one as sometimes individuals may feel. And there's an awful lot around the how we communicate to customers, the messaging that we have and the offers that we make. To me, the fundamental part in terms of the success and growth of much more sort of focused, targeted marketing is around the value exchange, the transparency, and the dialogue that you can build with customers, and that is around that they perceive and get. They not only perceive but actually get value from the data that they give you, that they trust you to use it in a way that adds value to them, and that they can see the benefit of telling you when you get it wrong. So again, one of the things that we're very much looking at is there is an awful lot of information that one can tell about a person or a customer from their spend data on a credit card. But if we turned around and said, we know that you shopped in shop X, you bought Y, and actually there's an offer that you could have got it cheaper elsewhere, that would probably freak you out. If we've had a dialogue with you that says, we know some stuff about you because you have a credit card with us and you would expect us to know that and use that information, A, are you happy for us to use that information to try and help you? And B, is there anything more you'd like to tell us so that we can be more relevant for you? Then that puts you into a very different frame of mind with the customer around actually you're into a much more adult-to-adult kind of relationship, rather than at the moment a lot of the targeting seems to be very push and very parent-child.
I've never had that, for example. I would be delighted to have that. If somebody actually asked me, I would understand it. It's like the information in trains. It's like when the train stops, if the train kind of controller gets on the line and says, we don't know what's going on, but we'll keep you in touch, it's actually much better than just pure silence.
There's a famous quote by, I think he's a US ice hockey player called Wayne Gretzky, where he said, don't go where the puck is, go where it's going to be. And my advice would be that, if you want to know where the future's going to be, look at your 16-year-old kids, because they are growing up in a world where privacy is a completely different concept to the one that you have. Not necessarily me, I'm probably halfway in between. They don't mind sharing their data. If you say to a 16-year-old, do you want 100 adverts that are random, or do you want the same number of adverts, but I can tell you they'll be targeted to the ski holiday that you want to take in March? They're going to say, well, I'd much rather have targeted advertising. So look at them, because they're used to that. That's the environment they're growing up in. And we as marketers, we as ad companies need to try and follow them. I mean, we'd like to be shoulder to shoulder, but we're always going to be behind and trying to catch up.
And also, looking at the same target group, accept that they say something in return. I mean, accept their comments, their criticism, the dialogue that's going on. So far, I mean, brands have not been really, keen to engage with customers or with potential or future customers. And that's something you have to do as early as possible. Build trust, as you said, but not just trust, build a relationship that's going to be long-lasting. And that's the way to go. And also, that's going to add value to whatever you do, whether it be products, content.
Right. This is such an interesting discussion. We only have 5 minutes left. Are there any questions over to our friend?
Yes.
Any questions? Yes. Could you introduce yourselves? Sorry, we can't see very well. There we are. They have the lights. Unfortunately, we only have about 4 minutes left. So let's see who is going to ask the first question. It will be somebody sitting right absolutely at the back. There we are.
Hi.
Who are you?
Oh, yeah, I'm going to stand up. Hi, Nicola. I'm from Synthesio, working on social media monitoring. I'm really interested in all that you said about big data. I know the complexity of aligning all the silos between CRM, social media, what you own, what you earn, and stuff. But how do we deal, I think we didn't come to that point, between the value of the customers, being a returning customer, vs the kind of influence of the customer. How do you deal with that? What's your opinion about that? One customer being very noisy but very few value, vs. high value customers with no visibility on social media, for instance.
I'm very happy to talk about this because we have some very specific and live examples of this with Barclaycard at the moment, because as you can probably imagine, we do have some very vocal customers. We have a very proactive approach to comment and opinion around Barclaycard on Facebook and Twitter in particular. And what we endeavour to do is A, respond very publicly around particular issues, A, respond as openly as we possibly can, so B, respond as openly as we possibly can, without divulging particular customer data, because we have to be very obviously careful again around open conversations in social media. But the third thing that we're looking at is kind of the magic moments that we create, and actually looking at whether people will be advocates for the brand as well. So we have had some very specific examples recently around, particularly around the Barclaycard and Wine sponsorship, which is a music and festival type sponsorship really that we run in the UK. And we had a discourse on Facebook from somebody who had been unable to use some tickets that she'd got for Unwind because unfortunately a family member was seriously ill and subsequently passed away. And our Facebook team actually reached out to her and said, really, really sorry to hear about that. And is there anything that we can do? And she was like, no, but it's very kind and amazing that you actually bothered to have a conversation with me about it. Off the back of that, Barclaycard have given her tickets to go to another event, and she has become a huge advocate for us. So what was a bit of a moan about, oh, I wasn't able to go to this event, big brands don't care, etc., has become a very positive piece.
Who can actually make the decision to do that thing? Because isn't that the problem? It seems to me as a customer that for somebody to actually be able to take over and say, let's do something for them, it has to be pretty high up. I mean, how low down can you enable people to make that kind of customer-friendly decision? That's the question.
It's not, certainly where we are, there's a very big piece. As everybody's aware of, there's been a number of issues around banks and cultures in banks, so there's an awful lot of very proactive work going on to empower people to do those kind of simple, nice things that everybody would want to do for another person. So actually what we do have is empowerment at those customer-facing advisor levels up to certain value levels where they can actually make those gestures of goodwill. So advisors on Barclaycard phones, don't everybody ring up and say you have a dreadful issue now. But we are very much trying to empower our frontline colleagues to make those decisions.
10 seconds.
Yeah, I know we've got 10 seconds, but a friend of mine at home bet me £10 that no one would pay to come and see me. So if you don't mind, can you all just smile?
Okay, you all have to wave to him. Si vous pouvez faire un geste pour son ami.
Perfect. That's £10 in the bank for me.
Thank you very
I'll buy you
much.
a pint.